We begin with this video to our monitors out of the Middle East. Israel and Iran continue to exchange strikes for the sixth day in a row. According to Iranian state media, what you see here is smoke. It's coming out of one of Iran's missile production facilities. Meanwhile, President Trump is now considering joining forces with Israel to put an end to Iran's nuclear program. That decision likely hashed out during a Situation Room meeting yesterday. Now, these are the familiar faces CBS News can confirm attended that roundtable. One of the nuclear facilities being targeted is this one, the name Fordow. That site is buried almost 300 feet beneath a mountain and protected by significant air defenses. Sources tell us it's believed to be key to Iran's nuclear program. Well, minutes ago at the White House, President Trump was asked if he would strike nuclear sites like this one. Listen to what he had to say.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction. Why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine.
Have the Iranians reached out to you?
Yes.
And what did they say?
I said, it's very late. You know? I said, it's very late to be talking. We may meet. I don't know. There's a big difference between now and a week ago, right? Big difference.
What does unconditional surrender mean?
Well, you know what it means. Unconditional.
Can you explain it for those who don't?
Two very simple words. Very simple. Unconditional surrender. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it. I give up. No more. Then we go blow up all the all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place there. No, they had bad intentions. You know, for 40 years they've been saying death to America, death to Israel, death to anybody else that they didn't like. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore, but we'll see what happens. Look, nothing's finished until it's finished. You know, war is very complex. A lot of bad things can happen. A lot of turns are made. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that we won anything yet. I would say that we sure as hell made a lot of progress. And we'll see. The next week is going to be very big, maybe less.
Meanwhile, Iran is doubling down. When asked at what point the country would be willing to abandon its uranium stockpile, the Iranian ambassador to the UN responded, quote, Iran is not going to give up its right to use peaceful nuclear technology. We've got team coverage standing by for us from the ground in Iraq, CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams. And live at the Pentagon, CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett. But first, let's go live to the White House for what President Trump just said. Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Good to see you today, Ed. What else did the president say? What else did he have to say today that stood out to you?
Well, he suggested there he may do it, he may not do it, which of course will be heard around the world as holding us all in suspense as to what exactly the United States may do, if anything, to join Israel in its attack on Iran. He did suggest that Iran has offered to come to the White House for talks and that he turned those down. But the United Nations mission of Iran a little while ago on X refuted that, saying that is not the case, and essentially denying what the president suggested. The president also said he spoke with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, on Tuesday, who apparently had offered to help mediate the situation between Israel and Iran. Trump says he told Putin focus instead on ending the war in Ukraine first. He also said he speaks with the Israeli prime minister every day and tells Benjamin Netanyahu keep going as it continues its operations against Iran. And is it too late to reach a deal with Iran? He was asked by one reporter, quote, nothing's too late. So we're getting some sense of the president's thinking on all of this. In essence, he supports what Israel's up to. He thinks Iran should have talked to him sooner, but no decision yet on whether or not the United States would join in some way Israel's attacks on Iran.
Right. And Ed, it's important to note that Iran is firing back to President Trump's remark. They said, quote, Iranians do not answer well to language of threat. Do you think President Trump is going to respond to that comment?
Well, in essence, he already has, and he very well may later if he's asked directly about what the Supreme Leader had to say earlier today, essentially that his country does not respond to threats. So you're seeing the rhetoric or the war of words, perhaps, between Iran and the United States intensify. Both countries signaling, you touch us, will strike back. Remember, the president's been saying now for about a week, if U.S. diplomatic or military targets or personnel are hit by Iran in the Middle East, there will be a forceful response. So, in essence, the markers have been laid, and now it's just up to the president to make a decision or signal that he's just monitoring this situation. Remember, he left the G7 summit quite quickly on Tuesday night, signaling he was coming back here to monitor the situation and possibly make some kind of decision. As you mentioned, there was that meeting in the White House Situation Room yesterday with his top advisors. They are split on what exactly he should do next. There are the years of concerns about foreign wars and U.S. involvement, but there's also the vow that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. He faces a choice potentially here in the coming hours and days as the conflict continues in the Middle East.
Yeah, and we shall wait and see. Ed, I have to ask you about lawmakers, because how does the rift throughout the Republican Party play into this decision? There seems to be a split among the party here.
Yeah, the president suggested there really isn't one, but there is. Members of his MAGA base are concerned about the potential of the U.S. engaging in another foreign conflict. There are Republican lawmakers split on this. You've got the interventionists like Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton on one side saying, go for it, attack Iran, especially if you conclude you have to. Others like Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky, or Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia saying, don't do it. It would go against your campaign pledges and your years of public statements. There are other Republicans who sort of sit in the middle. Nikki Haley, for example, his former opponent, saying, should Iran's nuclear facilities be taken out? Yes. But should the United States join Israel in a push for regime change? No, she says. That's up to the Iranian people and would be a step too far. So there have been debates about this in the Republican Party before. To what extent should the U.S. be involved in foreign wars? And ever since the Iraq era and George W. Bush, it's been a subject of great debate and concern among Republicans or conservatives. For now, the president is suggesting not much of an argument to be had. And we'll see how his party reacts should he make some kind of decision that involves U.S. military involvement.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We'll continue to see how all of this plays out. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for your expertise. We appreciate it. Now let's bring in Holly Williams. She is in Iraq for us today. Holly, President Trump called for Iran's unconditional surrender. Has the Supreme Leader responded to that call?
He has. We heard from Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei a little earlier today. It was actually a televised address. He struck a very bellicose tone. That's, of course, what we expect to hear from Iran's leadership. He said, firstly, that Iran does not respond well to the language of threat. He said that Iran will never surrender to coercion. And perhaps most interestingly of all, he said that any U.S. military intervention will, quote, result in irreparable harm to them.
And Holly, we know that there are U.S. bases not too far from Iran. So how could they respond if the U.S. does get directly involved in these airstrikes that we're seeing?
Yeah, very interesting question. I mean, Iran has already accused the U.S. of being complicit in Israel's attacks and has already threatened to retaliate against U.S. military bases and ships. There are many U.S. military bases here in the Middle East, all the way from Turkey in the north down to Oman and Djibouti. And we believe around 40,000 U.S. troops in the Middle East right now. Perhaps the most obvious target would be the roughly 2,500 U.S. troops here in Iraq, simply because they are right next door. But the question, I think, is what is Iran capable of right now? I mean, all of the focus has been on the damage done to their nuclear program because that was Israel's justification for starting this war. But Israel already has air supremacy in Iran after just a few days. And just yesterday, Iran said it had hit 12 different missile launch sites. Now, back in 2020, we saw Iran target a U.S. base here in Iraq with ballistic missiles. The question now is whether they could still do that today, and we don't know.
Wow, still a lot of unanswered questions. Holly Williams, thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, let's bring in CBS News' Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, thank you for being with us today. I want to first of all play back a soundbite from a Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at a Senate Armed Service Committee hearing. He responded to a question from Janine Shaheen about providing options to the president on strikes in the Middle East. Let's listen to that from moments ago.
Most of what I can or should say would be reserved for a classified setting. I would say the president, obviously, any decisions on this matter are at the presidential level. He has communicated very clearly for quite some time.
I do understand that, Mr. Secretary, but my question for you is whether you have been asked actively to provide options for the president regarding a strike in the Middle East.
If I had or I had not, I wouldn't disclose that in this forum, Senator. My job, our job, Chairman and I, at all times, is to make sure the president has options and is informed of what those options might be and what the ramifications of those options might be.
I appreciate that.
You mentioned the troops in the region.
I
maximum
expect
force protection at all times is being maintained.
So, Charlie, your thoughts on that exchange?
Yeah, well, I was watching, and really no surprises there. He's saying, you know, when decisions of war and peace are made by President Trump, that's an indication of where this is being driven from. It's the White House. He says the Department of Defense stands ready to execute. And yes, he was not about to disclose in a public forum whether he has provided President Trump with options. Force protection, as he pointed out, that is a priority. As we've reported, the United States has sent a significant number of refueling tanker aircraft closer to the region. If the situation there should escalate and would call for like long-range fighter jets that would need refueling, that in itself isn't necessarily like an indicator that the United States intends to enter the fight. As we've been told before, these are defensive measures as well. They're able to intercept incoming missiles. Also partly the reason for destroyers and cruisers that are able to launch cruise missiles in that region. Again, this is done in order to protect U.S. forces and interests in the region. We've also learned that some of the fighter aircraft have been dispersed in order to make them a less lucrative target if there is a retaliation against the United States. The Pentagon likes to call itself a planning organization, and whether the Secretary wants to share those options with the president, they're certainly preparing for every eventuality.
Yeah, and Holly Williams talked about this earlier, and you sort of mentioned it just moments ago, but can you give us a clear idea of what U.S. military presence looks like in the region?
Yeah, it's significant. As she said, approximately 40,000 U.S. forces, many within easy reach of Iranian missiles. That one in Iraq that she mentioned, a good number of those based in Kuwait. The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is in Bahrain, also at Al Udeid, the United Arab Emirates. We've learned that the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group is en route to the region as well from the Indo-Pacific. That will join the USS Carl Vinson carrier, 3 destroyers, and a guided missile destroyer that are already there. There are 2 additional destroyers in the Red Sea, 3 additional destroyers in the Eastern Mediterranean, and of course, with those carriers, there are squadrons of F-18 and F-35 fighter jets. So, you know, when that additional carrier strike group gets there in that region, that's about as forward postured as the military gets. We're also learning, you know, if the Houthis decide to join the fight too, that is possible. That could be a headache for U.S. ships in the Red Sea.
Wow. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate your time today.